Hi there. It is my hope that as you view this video that you will be extremely blessed and that you will be inspired. You know, one of the things that I've learned about the Bible is that it is not a book about literal history, but it is a book about us. And I think that's pretty significant because, you know, in our modern education, we're basically focused on externals, how to get a job, how to take care of family, getting an education, learning about math and about science and social studies, etc. And all of these things may be important, but is there a book that tells us, about who we are, about how we work, an instruction manual, if you will, that shows us how we can get the best out of life? And I've come to understand that that book, that method of training for us is not only the Bible, but all of the scriptures of the world. We live in the Western culture, and so therefore the Bible is our book of choice. But in other cultures, they have other books. The Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads in the Indian culture. In the Muslim and Muslim cultures, you have the Quran. And there are many other scriptures that many cultures use to try to understand who and what we really are. And one of the things that I've come to understand is that all of these books basically say the same things. Now, before you turn off this video, I'd like for you to keep an open mind about these things, because you're going to learn some very interesting things that I'm sure you've never heard before, things that you've never considered, but that you probably need to consider in order to come to a more full understanding. You know, I've heard the story of the frog that came out of the ocean and came to the well to visit a friend of his, another frog, in the well. And the frog that came out of the ocean had a very vast view of life. Of course, he came out of the ocean. But the frog that was in the well had a particularly narrow viewpoint, because all that frog knew was the well all of his life. And so when the frog came out of the ocean and tried to tell him about life, the frog in his dogma just tried to tell him, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. It's not this way. And after the frog in the well argued with the frog that came out of the ocean, the frog that came out of the ocean merely gave up trying to teach the frog that was in the well what he had come to understand. And so he eventually just left him to his own devices. That's kind of how it is in our world. If you're a Muslim, for example, and you've heard one particular viewpoint of the world and how it goes, how it works, you have that particular viewpoint. And if you haven't seen any other viewpoint, then that's all you know. The same for the Christian and for the Jew. If you were taught from a Christian viewpoint, or if you're taught from a Jewish point of view, that's all you know. I've had the privilege of studying many of the scriptures of the world, and I've come to have a great appreciation for what those scriptures bring to the table in our approach to understanding what life is all about. In the Bhagavad Gita, for example, it's fascinating. And there are various sects of Hinduism, as you know. But most of Hinduism takes the Bhagavad Gita literally. And for those of you who don't know about the Bhagavad Gita, it opens up with God and Arjuna having a discussion. And God gives Arjuna a mission. And Arjuna, not knowing what the mission is, decides, this is God, I am going to be obedient. And so Arjuna accepts the mission. And what Arjuna is told to do is to slay everyone that he sees on the battlefield. And Arjuna was excited about his mission until he gets to the battlefield. What he finds is very interesting. What he finds is all his relatives, his aunts, his uncles, his cousins, and his heart begins to sink. Oh God, I can't do this. This is too much. I can't kill all these people. These are my relatives. This is what Arjuna basically is saying. And God tells him to slay them. Our Bible is written kind of in a similar fashion. You know, the relatives that we are called upon to fight are all within us. And this is what the Bible is teaching as well. The battles in the Bible is all about the war within. And this is extremely significant. You know, we look at the Bible in terms of the battles that we're called upon to fight. And, you know, we have a war against Satan, and we have to fight against evil. And, you know, we look at people as being our enemies. The scripture says that your enemies are not flesh and blood. But we don't get it. We don't really understand these things. But the war is a war within. It's about spiritual wickedness in high places within us. The forces that lie within us are in conflict with each other. But there are powers within us. And those powers are constantly battling. And it is the war, what the scriptures call them, Jesus and Satan. Now, it's interesting that when the scriptures speak about our glory, and Colossians 1:27 is very clear on this. It says, Christ in you, your hope of glory. Well, Satan is a force that is also within us. And unless we come to understand this, we will forever be in the dark with regard to what the scriptures are saying to us. You know, author Schopenhauer has said that all truth goes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. And finally, it is accepted as self-evident. Now, you're going to hear some very, very strange things in the course of reviewing this video. Things that, if you don't turn it off right in the middle of listening to it, are going to completely challenge you, as they did me. But I think what you'll find, if you're able, and many people are not, quite frankly, but if you're able to stretch your mind a little bit, if you're able to follow this through, it will give you, at the very least, some new thoughts to consider, a new way of approaching the scriptures, a new and refreshing way, because as you will come to find, and as I have found, the current religious view of the scriptures simply don't make any sense. I think the first thing that I want to show you is that the Bible is a book of symbols. But what's so fascinating about that is that it explains its symbols. And so we're not left in the dark to try to figure out what it's saying. All we have to do is to understand the symbols. It's a new language, or a new tongue, another tongue, if you will. In 1 Corinthians, the scriptures speak about speaking in tongues. Well, what the scripture is basically saying is that the Bible is written in another tongue. Not necessarily another language such as English or Spanish, but just that the symbols of the Bible don't mean what we've always taken them to mean. And an example of that is the word temple. In the Old Testament, the building of the temple was a very complex, a very complicated process. And there were very rigid rules and regulations in the building of the temple. But then when we come to the New Testament, the Bible explains to us what the temple is. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 16, it says that you are the temple of God. And if anyone destroys the temple of God, him shall God destroy. Now, this wasn't some foreign concept that was just introduced into the New Testament. When the Bible, the Old Testament, is speaking about the temple, it is speaking about you. It is speaking about me. And so this building is in the midst of, or in the process of, being constructed. This is just one example of the symbols of the Bible. Another symbol is that of obeying father and mother, that thy days may be long upon the land that the Lord thy God giveth thee. Well, of course, you look at the at the mother and father, biological mother and father, and let's look at the example of a father who wants to take his daughter, wants to make her a prostitute. And so he buys her very fancy clothes, he trains her on what a prostitute is supposed to do. And if your concept of father and mother is of our earthly father and mother, then all this daughter would have to do would be to obey her father, and she's going to live long upon the land that the Lord thy God giveth. Well, it doesn't take much thought to see that is complete nonsense. And I had a conversation with someone, and I tried to explain that to him, and his response to that left me in awe that somebody can see something so plain and so clear and yet can completely ignore it. And his response to me was, no, mother and father is your natural mother and father. Well, the scripture tells us what mother and father is. And if you want to look it up, father, the definition of father is in Romans 4:16. The definition of mother is in Galatians 4:26. Honor father and mother. And we're going to look at these in a more complete scope. But for now, I just wanted to show you that symbols are the order of the day when it comes to trying to understand the Bible. Another symbol is that of sons and daughters. You know, and in the book of Job, one of the things that God does to Job is to kill or to allow his sons and daughters to be killed. And I don't know about you, but I'm a human being and I love my family. And to me, that would be one of the most heinous crimes that could be committed, was to allow this God whose love supposedly endures forever, whose mercy endures forever, could take this man whom the scriptures call in the very first verse of the entire book of Job a perfect man, and to kill his family. Why would I want to have anything to do with such a God? But the problem is we don't understand. Sons and daughters are a symbol in the Bible, and you can find that symbol, the explanation of that symbol in Ezekiel, I believe it's chapter 24 and verse 25. It's very, very interesting. Now, it's very important to understand that the information that I have learned over the course of the past 15 years. It's all radically different from anything that I or you have ever heard, and it is impossible for me to convey all of that information in the course of 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 videos. This is going to be an ongoing work. And what I hope to do over the course of time is to help you to see the things that I have learned, to see exactly what the scriptures really are saying. And then, of course, you can make up your own mind as to whether they make any sense or if they make no sense. And, of course, if they make no sense, you simply throw it away. But you may find, as I have found, that this stuff makes plenty of sense. It is all right there in front of us. And the reason why we haven't seen it is because our foundation has been faulty. And as scripture says, anything built on a false foundation or faulty foundation will fall. It cannot stand because there is no foundation. A false foundation is the same as no foundation. And so I first want to talk about concepts, the whole concept. First of all, heaven and earth. Again, if the Bible is not literal, then heaven and earth, the scriptural portrayals, aren't literal. So what are these portrayals? And for these, we're going to go into the scriptures. So here's where we're going to begin our study. We're going to start with the study of earth and find out what earth is. Because whatever earth is, this is where Christ is coming to rule and to reign on the earth. However, we're going to take a look at this subject in my next video. So stay tuned and thank you for watching.